Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Hing Wong, and I'm the chair of the APA Asian and Pacific Islander Interest Group. Our group was formed 3 years ago, and our goals are to bring together Asian and Pacific Islander planners, assist them in their career development, and discuss issues affecting the communities and neighborhoods that are predominantly Asian and/or Pacific Islanders. Today's webinar featured the Chinese, Indian, and Filipino communities. This is a third of a multi-part series. The first webinar features Southeast Asian communities of Cambodian, Hmong, Thai, and Vietnamese. The second webinar was with the Pacific Islander and Hawaiian communities. Many outside the Asian and Pacific Islander communities think that all Asian and Pacific Islanders ethnicities are alike, but we know that is not true. We're excited to have panelists today from the Chinese, Indian, and Filipino communities to discuss similarities and differences. Next slide, please. Hassan, next slide. Well, I'll keep reading.
Yeah, just keep going. It's not advancing.
Okay. If you are not yet a member of our interest group, please consider joining by filling out a membership survey. Being a member is completely free, and you do not need to be Asian nor Pacific Islander to join. Members will receive periodic emails and our activities and events, as well as our quarterly newsletter. Additionally, our website has all past issues of our newsletter and recorded webinars. We'll put the links in the chat in case, since you can't see the screen right now. This webinar is being recorded, and we have applied for 1.5 CM credits and 1 equity credit. During the webinar, please use the chat features if you have questions or comments for the speakers. Hansen Ham, our special project director, will be monitoring the chats. Finally, as a courtesy to all, please mute your audio so that there isn't background noise or affecting the presentation. At this time, Bill Anderson, a former APA national president, will be today's moderator, and he will introduce today's program and panel.
Thanks, Heng. Good afternoon, everybody. Today is going to be an interesting combination of East Coast and West Coast. And our first speaker is Ditas Yamane from National City, and to be followed by John Chin from Philadelphia and Barnali Ghosh from Berkeley, California. So let's move on to the next slide. And let me introduce Ditas. National City is actually in San Diego County, so it's near my location as well. If you're ever down in San Diego, go there for some great food. And it's halfway between downtown San Diego and the Mexican border. Go down, next slide, please. Now, Ditas is a council member, vice mayor of the city of National City, the first Filipino and Filipina council member in the city, even though it has a large Filipino population. She's lived there for 30 years. And as an immigrant, she helped form the Mabuhay Foundation, which is focused on building and educating the Filipino-American community in economic, social, health, and political empowerment through civic engagement. She also works with organizations that are active with the military and veteran communities, of which the Filipino community is largely represented. And she's a past president of the National City Chamber of Commerce and the Pacific Southwest Association of Realtors in San Diego County. She was a member of the Planning Commission in National City and is now on City Council and serves as chair of the Housing Advisory Board. So, Ditas, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to this webinar, the Asian Pacific associations engaging and empowering the API communities. Thank you, Bill, for that introduction. I was, I said, I did that, and so I, thank you so much for that. Well, I'm here to talk to you about National City, my beloved city here in the South Bay, in the San Diego County region. So about National City, in the center of it all, that's our branding. In the center of it all, because, we have three freeways that you cannot go to San Diego without passing National City, nor you cannot go to Chula Vista if by not passing National City, because we have the freeways. So the Spanish land grant El Rancho de la Nacion was purchased by Frank, Warren, and Levi Kimball in 1868. The Kimball brothers cleared the lands, built roads, constructed the city's first wharf, and brought the railroad to the city. They successfully advertised National City as the most healthful climate on earth. Three-line streets soon connected Gray's Victorian homes, and orchards flourished over rolling hills. National City, San Diego County's second oldest city, is truly in the center of it all, a thriving binational region of 5 million consumers. The city's competitive edge in its central location, transportation, network, and business industry. National City is 10 minutes from everywhere and positioned for prosperity, with proximity to the San Diego Bay, US-Mexico border, downtown San Diego International Airport, railroads, San Diego State universities, and other colleges and universities. National City is served by Interstates 5 and 805s and Highway 54 and 15. The San Diego Trolley and the Metropolitan Transit System provide public transit service to the National City 7 days a week. These transportation resources conveniently connect the city to the region. National City is home to more than 2,000 businesses, a remarkable number for a city with an estimated population of 55,550. As one of the healthiest business climates in Southern California, National City attracts business from various industries and sectors. Business types range from small family-owned operations to multi-million-dollar corporations. National City also boasts the highest sales tax revenue per capita in the county. The National City Marine Terminal, part of the Unified Port of San Diego, is the most advanced vehicle import and export facility on the West Coast, processing more than 500,000 vehicles annually. Lumber is also imported from the Pacific Northwest for construction use throughout the region. National City's port area extends 3 miles along San Diego Bay and is part of the largest US Navy installation of the West Coast. City attractions, of course, we have shopping. National City is a great place for shopping. The city is served by several major shopping centers. The South Bay Plaza, the first regional shopping center in San Diego, National City Shopping Center, Sweetwater Crossing, Bay Plaza Shopping Center, Grove Shopping Center, and the Westfield Plaza Bonita, the largest enclosed mall in the South Bay. If you're shopping for a car, visit the Mile of Cars, where you'll find 9 automobile dealers offering more than 5,000 cars from over 17 major brands. The Mile of Cars leads the San Diego area in per capita vehicle sales. Dining, if you're in the mood for food, whether it's be Mexican, Japanese, or a good old-fashioned cheeseburger, National City has it all. The National City restaurant scene has over 200 restaurants to choose from, running from the full range from affordable fast food to interesting ethnic restaurants to fine dining. Historical sightseeing, National City's Victorian heritage is one of its most important assets. Visit one of the 4 buildings in the city that are listed in the National Register of Historic Places: the Brick Row on Heritage Square, Granger Music Hall, the Santa Fe Rail Depot, and St. Matthew's Episcopal Church. City parks, National City's 87.2 acres of parkland exceed the statewide norm. The city's 5 major parks include El Toyon Park, Kimball Park, Las Palmas Park, Sweetwater Heights Park, and Paradise Creek Park. We have golfers of all ages invited to golf the National City Golf Course. The 9-hole course offers discount for city residents and economical rates for non-residents, as well as the National City's Recreation Division provides 3 recreation centers, a senior citizen center, a municipal pool, and there's instructions are offered at the various centers in athletics, fitness, dance, music, crafts. National City's Recreation Division offers a diverse year-round program of activities for ages. Our city government, National City, is a general law city and operates under the council-manager form of government. The city council has 5 members, a mayor, and 4 council members. The mayor is elected at large, while the 4 council members are elected by district. They each have 4-year terms with a limit of 3 consecutive terms. By voters' decision, the city treasurer and the city clerk position has been transitioned to be appointed. The city council is responsible for setting policies, enacting ordinances, adopting the budget, reviewing the general plan, appointing committees, appointing the city manager and city attorney. The city manager is responsible for carrying out the policies and directives of the city council, ensuring that laws and ordinances are duly enforced, appointing city department heads, and overseeing the day-to-day operations of the city. Our city's general information, we were incorporated in September 17 of 1887. Population as per US Census Bureau estimates 55,000 on a 9.2 square miles with a land area of 7.3 square miles. National City is bordered by the city of San Diego to the north and east, the city of Chula Vista to the south, then incorporated areas of Lincoln Acres and Bonita to the south and southeast, and the San Diego Bay to the west. Transportation facilities and services, interstate freeways, I-5 and I-805 across the city from north to south, and State Route 54 traverses the southern edge of town. Port and rail facilities, National City Marine Terminal, San Diego Unified Port District, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, and the San Diego and Arizona Eastern Railway. Public transit, we have Metropolitan Transit System, a bus service through the city and adjacent areas. And we have San Diego Trolley, where 2 stations are here in National City. Following our estimates of land use areas within the city, percentages are based on net acreage, including streets, highways, and other transportation facilities. For land use residential, we have 28.55% of land area, transportation 16.7%, water 13.1%, industrial 12.6%, military, as you can see, this is a military base 9.5%, commercial land area is 5.6%, institution and education, we have 5.1%, parks and recreation 4.7%, shopping center 2.6%, and we have a vacant land of 2.2%. According to the US Census, National City experienced a steady population expansion until 2010, with 2020 representing the first decennial census in which the city saw a decline in overall population. The overall population decreased by 2,400, primarily due to a significant drop in the number of people counted in group quarters. Group quarters population decreased by 4,700, while household population grew by 2,300. Population by ethnic group, Hispanics, large Hispanic community in our city, 65%. Whites, 44%, Asian and Pacific Islanders, 17.7%, Black, 4.40%. As you can see, we have a total gross value of a property valuation with the number of parcels at 9,865. Housing characteristics, we have 18,249 with a 5.7 vacancy. Average household is about 4 people, and household population is 55,000. Group quarters population, we have 1,583. Owner occupancy here, as you can see, is only 30%, and we have a high percentage of renter occupied housing, which is 63%. Median household income, according to the census in 2021, is approximately 52,000. Median age is about 40. Income average about 54, per capita of 21,500. We have city employment, civilian of 24, about 87% of our population, and military is 13.8%. We have 11 elementary schools, 2 intermediate schools, 1 high school, and we have Southwestern College, which is our community college in National City. So now that you have an idea about the National City, based on the population by ethnic group, Asian Americans, particularly a Filipino American, cannot win in any at-large election in our city. So after running several times, I had it. I had to find another strategic way to assert for representation in my city as the second largest ethnic population in our city. From my perseverance of running my own campaign so many times, I am broke, but not broken. Those defeats and losses made me stronger. The California Voting Rights Act of 2001 paved my way to be elected in a city of which there has no Filipino American or Asian Pacific Islander representation for more than 50 years. With the help of a good friend and the Philippine Honorary Consul of San Diego County, Attorney Audie De Castro, we demanded and threatened to sue the city of National City to be districted. Our communities banded and organized. Several public hearings were held from January to early 2022. Community forums, town hall meetings, media outreach, and social media network, and with an organized and stronger voice. On December 21, 2021, the National City Council voted to change the way city council members are elected, transitioning from an at-large elections for city council members, creating districts within the city, and adopting a district boundary map. The city of National City began the districting process using the 2020 federal census data. The final map incorporates the public's input and defines the 4 city district boundaries. The district boundary lines will impact how residents elect their council members for the next 10 years. And in the general elections in November of 2022, I received 65% of the vote as the first Filipino-American immigrant elected in office in the city of National City. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what happened, and I am your humble servant. Thank you. Maraming salamat po. That's my district. Building cleaner, healthier, and safer neighborhoods. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bill. Thank you,
Dita. And yeah, that was a very important change for the city to go to district elections. And
yes, sir.
All about the raw politics of
yes.
how organized our
yes.
government.
We should be at the table all the time, Mr. Bill. Otherwise, we're on the menu.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Dita.
Thank you, sir.
And move on to John. All right. There we go. And moving to the other side of the country, John is the executive director of the Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation, a nonprofit that is formed to preserve, protect, and promote Chinatown, which has been in existence since the 1960s. And his core value is self-determination for the community. And after decades, really, of experiencing environmental injustice imposed that John's going to talk about. Their group is organized for planning and advocacy support services, but as a community development corporation, also very focused on economic security and economic development, with working with businesses and households, including the development of mixed income housing. John serves on the Mayor's Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs and other boards in the greater Philadelphia area, and is on the Mayor's Board of Commission on Aging, as well as ADI, and is a founding member of the Histories Collaborative. John, welcome.
Bill, thank you very much. Great to be here. And great presentation by our Vice Mayor. I'm gonna shrink down the geographic area. We don't have 55,000 people, but we're gonna focus on a little community called Chinatown in Philadelphia City. And Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation has been around 56 years. We were founded because the government had proposed to put the Vine Street I-676 highway through our community. And since that time, we have not only been advocates, but one of our core functions is that we are neighborhood planners, urban planners for Chinatown. And the reason this is important is because, as Bill had mentioned in his introduction of me, planning by the people for the people. This is a really significant way that residents who don't have the voting power, don't have the voice, can dictate how our neighborhood is developed. We want to develop our neighborhood in the vision that we see, whether it's affordable housing that we want, or whether we're trying to build up our voting base and power, or whether we want to celebrate our culture. You can see one of the photos here, a photo of our annual night market where we have 40 some food vendors, 20,000 people come out to Chinatown to have a festive night around food and family and friends. Next slide.
John, I'm having difficulties with all the slides.
Sure. While the slide, while we wait for the slide to catch up, Bill mentioned our mission: to preserve, to protect, and to promote Chinatown. So a lot of our comprehensive services, we're not just housing developers or urban planners, but we're social service providers. We focus on youth programming. We focus on social service benefits for our families and senior citizens, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But more importantly about Chinatown is that as much as we are here to serve the people, we are also a very much so a place-based agency. And what that means is that preservation of Chinatown is core in our mission. You know, I think we beat National City by a decade or so. Our Chinatown was founded when the first laundry business opened up in 1871. And we've been around here 150 years now, a little over. And we know how hard it is to preserve Asian communities because there's a lot of forces, environmental forces that are placed upon our communities and weakens our ability to preserve and to protect it. So we are very much a place-based organization as well. Hey, oh, there you go. Okay, let's try to move to the next slide.
John, I'm having real difficulty. Okay.
Okay, great. So we're going to spend a little bit of time here. So what do we mean when we talk about place-based engagement in Chinatown? While we're trying to do positive work for our community and building more affordable housing, addressing low-income housing issues, food insecurity, economic insecurity, every decade there seems to be a project that comes along that is forced upon our Chinatown community, but not in our Chinatown vision, right? As I mentioned, in 1966, it started with the Vine Street Expressway, where community residents organized themselves and their neighbors. And what we have is the Chinatown associations run by the elders to fight to preserve and protect Chinatown. That was the first ever really organized effort from our community against government action. And um, while we didn't stop the expressway, what we did do was we forced the government to agree to a scaled down expressway where they sunk the highway portion below street level and retained the local highway lanes, right, to minimize the traffic that would cut through our community. But it still divided our community, and that's unfortunate. If we fast forward to the 1980s, the city wanted to relocate its convention center to the western side of Chinatown. And due to that, the city rerouted the trains that came into Center City to the east side of Chinatown. So they blocked the western side of Chinatown. They condemned homes to eminent domain and built an entire commuter rail tunnel underneath the east side of Chinatown. If that wasn't enough, 1993, the government decides to build a federal prison in Chinatown. But one thing we can laugh at now, because it never happened, is at that time in the 1990s, federal government funded projects were required to perform an environmental impact study, right? And the location of the proposed federal prison was east of the Holy Redeemer Elementary School. And the impact study stated that a federal prison would have no negative impact on the elementary school or the kids attending that school. I think the lesson there is that the person who pays for the consulting report gets the report that they want. I hope no one's a consultant. And in 2000, one of the biggest protests in the history of Chinatown was a protest against the placement of the Phillies baseball stadium northwest of Chinatown. And 2008, we had the Foxwood Casino. That didn't happen either. And today in 2022, 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, the 76ers NBA team is proposing to build an arena on the south side of Chinatown. So the history of Chinatown is that we have development and proposals, blocking the growth and expansion of Chinatown. Next slide. So we talked a lot about the physical presence of Chinatown. And when we dig deep into what else does PCDC do, we believe in a comprehensive approach to community development. And that includes addressing economic and food insecurity for low-income families and creating a pathway to home ownership and building wealth and equity for our families. So you can see the list from there. We do we run a number of different programs. Because Chinatown has almost 200 retail businesses on the ground floor and almost 300 businesses total in our district, we have a commercial quarter manager that provides technical assistance, marketing, and programming to support our small businesses. Because as we know, commercial quarter economies are really critical to job maintenance and creation for first-generation immigrants who don't speak English as a first language. And we're pretty proud of the fact that we have a team of maybe, I think, 10 people now in the commercial quarter program, of which most of them do maintain in the streets of Chinatown, keeps it clean and inviting. Next slide. So, we spent the last couple slides talking about the harm that we've had to fight off for Chinatown. And I talked about urban planning as a tool to preserve Chinatowns. When the highway did come through and was finally built in 1991, we never gave up as an agency, and we never gave up as a community to figure out how to undo the harm of the Bicycle Expressway. The greatest harm really, aside from the pollution, the particulate matter and the noise pollution, is that it really cut our community in half. And it's taken a long time with little projects here and there, to improve the connectivity and to mitigate the dangerous vehicular accidents that have happened over the decades. This timeline talks about the work, persistence, and grit of this community, because in 2016 was the first time that we realized that there could be resources and funding through the Department of Transportation at the federal level. We got resources to bring a team of federal planners down to plan on how we could reconnect the community over Expressway. Fast forward to 2023, through the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, Reconnecting Communities program, which is very specific for minority communities. We were awarded $1.8 million to do construction design for a cap to cover the highway, to eliminate the divide, to reduce the number of lanes, and to make it more pedestrian friendly. We took a shot in September of 2023. We applied for construction dollars, and lo and behold, March of this year, we were awarded $158 million to actually pay for the construction project. So I think this is really a landmark moment in the history of Philadelphia's Chinatown, that this community, which doesn't have the votes, many times lacks the advocacy voice that elected officials are willing to hear, that we now have an opportunity to really overcome the negative impact of the highway and try to rebuild our community. And that project, by the way, is called the Chinatown Stitch, and that's something you can look up. So looking at our neighborhood, we have about 5,000 people living in what we call the core of Chinatown. We are experiencing gentrification. As you can see, the rent have rose during a 3-year period in the middle of the pandemic. About 14.3% housing cost increase for renters. We do have a significant amount of low-income residents who live in Chinatown, and significant amount of immigrants who lack education. But today, our biggest threat really is gentrification, the rising costs of not just for residents, right? We have almost 300 businesses there. Rising rent costs for our businesses, which can have a displacement effect. Next slide. So here's a little bit more demographics for you. 28% of our residents are foreign-born, and you can see the ethnicity makeup of Chinatown. We have the greatest portion is Asian, which make up 45%, right? Asian being native-born and foreign-born in Chinatown. We have Black, and second largest population is white population. We have a growing Hispanic population in and around Chinatown. Many of the residents who are Hispanic work in our businesses in Chinatown. And as you can see on the income bar on the left, you can see the gentrifying effects. $150,000 income and greater. Look at that bar, right? That wasn't so much the case 10 years ago. And you can also see that we have a significant portion who are living in poverty. Next slide. Here's a little bit more of a breakdown. So our poverty line is $20,000 for 2 people, and $26,000 for 3 people, and 4 people is $31,000. So 29% of individuals in Chinatown live at or below the poverty line. This is an educational moment for people that don't understand the diversity of the Asian population, which Hanson talked about earlier. at the beginning of the presentation. We are very, very diverse. No, we're not all model minorities. Everybody's rich and successful and highly educated. That's absolutely not true. In Philly, Chinatown, the demographics really underscore that. And it's a learning moment for people that really don't understand the Asian American race, right? Education level attainment is significant too. As you can see, the immigrant population, many come from rural areas and just don't have the education attainment that we would expect. And that's, look at that data, it just counters the model minority myth. We have impoverished senior citizens and children in Chinatown. Next. I want to conclude on this note here. We mentioned International District, Chinatown, Seattle, Philly, Chinatown, and Little Tokyo. The unfortunate thing, the three cities, towns, communities that we have here, the common thread is that all three of our communities are listed on the National Trust for Historic Preservation's 11 most endangered places in 2023 and 2024. So again, external pressures causing the displacement of people living and doing business in our communities. This is a real challenge that we have today, and just only exacerbated by the pandemic. Next. So what is PCDC doing about it? We're looking to update our neighborhood plan that was last done in 2017. We're going to incorporate an external scan of the environment around us and what has changed since 2017. But more importantly, we are trying to work with the city of Philadelphia to implement policy changes and tools to tackle displacement due to gentrifying forces and try to tackle the rising cost of housing and rents for small businesses. We are part of an organization called SBAN, Small Business Anti-Displacement Network. A lot of great data and information. We've learned what San Francisco Chinatown did many years ago. We're looking at different cities of how they're handling it, both Asian communities and non-Asian communities. We've got some funding, foundation funding to look at community land trusts. Does this model work? How do we acquire commercial land for commercial land trusts and preserve affordable rents for legacy businesses, right? As we see legacy businesses that don't pass off the second, third generation, we just lose these businesses. And when we lose these businesses, we lose the ability and role as a hub for Asian culture and celebration. So we're looking at all these, and I think the most hopeful possibility for us is the tax increment financing tool here. So that's what we're looking at today.
Okay, thank you, John. Yeah, we'll have some good follow-up conversation about gentrification and commercial gentrification too. That's good. Our next speaker is Barnali, coming back to the other side of the coast. And Barnali is the Berkeley-based landscape architect and designer, community historian, and transportation advocate, as you can see behind her. And she is also a first-time political candidate, which is terrific. She leads a monthly Berkeley South Asian, and I like this, radical history walking tour. And no surprise, radical and Berkeley go hand in hand. And she has been working with 4 generations of immigrant activists in the community with archival research and oral history, She was featured in National Geographic and was voted best of the East Bay in the Bay Area. And they led a campaign to name Shattuck Avenue East Kala Bagai Way. Bagai Way is the first street in Berkeley to be named after an Asian American. And so she's was vice chair of the Berkeley Planning Commission, or currently is, and is on the Transportation and Infrastructure Commission, and is running for the Bay Area Rapid Transit BART Board of Directors. So welcome.
Thank you. And if you can stop screen sharing, I would love to share my screen. And as we're doing that, I'd love to hear from folks who joined us today, where you're joining us from, where you're based as we're sharing. And also if you have a APA background or an Asian American background, where your roots are. I think it would really speak to the diversity of our communities that John was talking about earlier. So please do put that in the chat. So again, I'm Barnali, and I'm speaking to you from Berkeley, California. If you're not familiar, we are just a 20-minute BART ride. Downtown Berkeley is just a 20-minute BART ride from downtown San Francisco, maybe 22 minutes. We're home to the University of California. We have a progressive reputation. We're the home of the free speech movement, the anti-war, the anti-Vietnam War movement. But we're also a city, and the city and the university don't always get along. I moved to Berkeley from Bangalore, India in 1999. I moved here to study landscape architecture, and I practiced as a landscape architect for a decade, designing public parks, school streets, and playgrounds. I got involved in South Asian organizing post 9/11 and as part of the anti-war movement. And I became I became an activist. But being an activist in our Asian American communities, it's quite complicated. It's not always seen as a thing that we should do or be engaged with. And this was a big reason why my husband Anirvan and we started the walking tour. And on the walking tour, we tell stories of South Asian resistance and organizing that happened right here on the streets of Berkeley. And through these stories, we hope to challenge the dominant narrative of who South Asians are. We want to tell a more inclusive story of Berkeley's radical legacy, which often, when you talk to people, starts with the 60s, but our stories go back 100 years. We also want to be able to connect the past and present, make our stories visible on the streets of Berkeley. And we use the funds raised to support folks who are doing this work today. So the funds support Bay Area Solidarity Summer, which is a summer camp for emerging South Asian activists ages 18 to 23. So the Berkeley tours, they happen every month. We've run over 275 tours over the last 11 years, and they've ranged, the participants range from fierce activists to curious but apolitical South Asian folks, immigrants, and folks who would not even be able to identify South Asia on a map. And last year, we piloted our San Francisco tour in the Mission District. So what are the stories that we share on this tour? So 50 years before the free speech movement, Berkeley, California was home to a very different kind of political movement. Up and down the West Coast of the United States and Canada, South Asian immigrants organized with a new movement called the Ghadar Party, fighting for a socially just, equitable world and freedom from India for the British. And since 2012, we've been telling the story of the Ghadar Party and subsequent generations of South Asian American feminists, LGBTQ activists, and youth organizers. One of the most powerful stories we share on the tour is of Kartar Singh Sarabha, a young anti-colonial activist and poet who was a leader in the Ghadar Party. In the 1910s, Ghadarites were organizing Desi immigrants, most of whom were Punjabi and Sikh, and bringing them together to organize an armed revolt against the British. Now, one of the challenges of doing the tour in Berkeley is our places have not been preserved or marked in any way. Also, the South Asian community, different from other Asian American communities, we were never, say, forcibly segregated into, say, a Chinatown. So our stories are everywhere. And also because of the way federal immigration blocked South Asians from coming here for decades, we don't really have these places preserved. So what we do is we use storytelling, visuals, and street theater to bring some of these original locations and histories to life. In this story, for example, Anirvan, my husband and my co-curator, plays the role of Kartar Singh Sarabha and takes us through his journey. We learn about Sarabha's experiences of being detained at Angel Island, of facing racism on the streets, and then helping build the Gadar Party, writing poetry and publishing a revolutionary newspaper that would mobilize thousands around the world. 2 years after coming to Berkeley, he would return to India to be part of the armed revolt against the British, would be captured and hung to death by the British at age 19. One of the most popular stories we share on the tour is one that happened at Berkeley High. Berkeley High is our only high school. It's a big high school. In 2001, in the days after 9/11, South Asian, Muslim, and Arab students at Berkeley High faced new waves of racist backlash attacks. Most of the students were called names like terrorists. Several faced physical violence. Their parents, who were from working class immigrant families from places like India and Pakistan, primarily Muslim and Sikh, tried to keep their children home from school to keep them safe from attacks that they were facing because of their race and religion. But instead, a dozen young immigrant South Asian kids from a group called Cultural Unity organized with support from teachers. They started a buddy program. They did anti-hate assemblies. They did anti-hate teach-ins going from classroom to classroom. And over the course of a few weeks, they totally changed the atmosphere in their school and brought safety not only to themselves, but to so many others. One of the most significant outcomes for us of doing this tour for over a decade has been the naming of a street in Berkeley for one of the earliest South Asian immigrants to the US. And this story, though, starts earlier. This renaming happened process started in 2019. The renaming happened in 2021. But all of this started with us learning about the housing discrimination faced by George Shima, who was a Japanese farmer who was trying to move into the Elmwood district of Berkeley in 1909. And as part of working on this campaign, we put together this map of housing discrimination in Berkeley that has impacted our Asian American communities. And you can see that on the Walking Tours website. But when it comes to Kala Bagai, Kala was from present-day Pakistan, and her and her family moved here in 1915. And Kala was one of a handful of South Asian women to arrive in the US, to be in the US at that time. They arrived in Angel Island, started living in San Francisco, and by 1916, they'd opened a curio shop in downtown Berkeley. They then found a home in Berkeley, but when they tried to move in, they were physically blocked from moving in by their white neighbors. After being driven out of Berkeley, she returned to San Francisco with her husband and children, where they set up a general store on Fillmore Street and raised their sons with support from German friends. But Kala survived local racism only to confront a federal anti-immigrant court ruling, an outcome of the Bhagat Singh Thind case that stripped all Indians of their citizenship, which led her husband, now a stateless person, to commit suicide out of heartbreak. In the face of this, Kala Bagai persisted. She put her 3 sons to college. She remarried, even though it was taboo in the community to remarry. And she went on to become a community builder for the early Indian American community in Southern California, where she had moved after World War II. As an Asian American woman, an immigrant, and a member of a minority faith, Bagai represents critical parts of our community who've been deeply underrepresented in civic naming. Asian Americans make up 20% of Berkeley today, but our immigrant histories are often ignored by Berkeley institutions. And yet we know that by telling a bigger, more inclusive history of Berkeley, that has the power to transform us and our city. For me, much of this is about creating a sense of belonging and healing. And as one of the lead organizers of the Kala Bagai Way campaign, we were so grateful for the support we received from Corina Gould, who's the tribal chair and spokesperson of the Lejan Ohlone. And the Ohlone are the original people of this land, and Corina is one of the most active folks in the city of Berkeley. I think for us, honoring Bagay reminds us, honoring Kala reminds us of the importance of welcoming and housing immigrants. It helps us mourn the neighbors we lost when she and those like her were kept out. Now, naming is often predicated on honoring only certain kinds of achievements. But with Kala Bagay, we get to focus on both honoring and reconciling difficult moments of our history, as we see in this quote from Rani Bagay, Kala Bagay's granddaughter, who was part of the process with us. So Kala Bagay Way is now a stop on the tour. We finally have something to point at. And for me, it's inspired me to continue to seek this sense of belonging in other ways. Over the pandemic, I started embodying California native flowers, sort of going back to my landscape architecture roots. And these are flowers that I would see on my walks in Berkeley, in my Berkeley neighborhood. I use Odissi dance and saris from South Asia, bridging home and homeland, and trying to understand the different ways that historic colonialism has impacted Odissi dance and handloom weaving, and also how settler colonialism has impacted California's native landscapes. For me, this is the way I'm finding home in a city, which sometimes wants to remind me that I don't belong here. As part of this journey, as a continuation of this journey, I decided last year to run for public office for the very first time. I will be on the November ballot, running to represent a very large district of 230,000 plus voters. And it will cost 65,000 to 100,000 to run. This is really a moment for us to see, how we support our Asian American communities, how we show up for our Asian American candidates. There is still underrepresentation of women and Asian Americans in many of these positions. If I'm elected, I would be the first South Asian on the BART board. I'm running both for personal reasons, because I was an immigrant who didn't have a driver's license for the first 15 years that I lived in this country, and I used public transit, and I walked and biked everywhere, and I saw all of the issues with it. And I'm also running as a climate candidate, trying to make the connection between reducing our transportation emissions here and the impact that that can have on our homelands. I want to leave folks with a resource from our friends at the South Asian American Digital Archive, who are actually based in Philadelphia. And this is a book and also their website, sada.org. If you're joining us from a different part of the country and you want to learn about the South Asian community where you live, this book can be a great resource. And I think engaging with our community in the present is really important, but we can't really do that without an understanding of how we got here and how so many of the rights that we have today can be gone in a moment if we are not vigilant. And that's part of the reason why our tour is not just about South Asians, but also about the organizing and resistance that it took. And feel free to reach out to us on all of these different ways. We're here. We are still running walking tours. If you're local, we welcome you to join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barnali. And I would say you don't have to be local either. I think I might even come up to the Bay Area just to go on the tour. A question I have for everyone is, because we have in our audience people who come from communities that are at different stages of organizing or development, is what have been the lessons you've learned or experienced, or talking to folks who were involved at the different stages, thinking about organizing and forming advocacy, collaborating, but the three different groups, initially within your community, because sometimes outsiders think, well, everyone from that community are the same, even though they have from the homelands or historical stories, very different stories to tell and relationships. The second would be many of the communities where we have Asian communities are part of multiracial, multicultural communities. So reaching out and engaging and collaborating with the other proud minority and ethnic groups within your broader community. And then the last level, more broadly at the city and regional level, population, the political and economic power base of where decisions are made about major investments and political support. So, so not a simple question, but I think an important one. So let me start with Barnali. Do you want to take that on first?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I was busy
Oh.
looking at where people were from. And I see a lot of Bay Area folks, but folks from everywhere, which is kind of cool,
yeah.
even from Alaska,
Yeah, so you can tell, I was saying, you know, people come from
Aiden,
different,
Florida.
yeah, and they come from different contexts and stages of organizing and development. So what have been some of the lessons learned regarding organizing within your community?
Yeah.
But also within the broader multicultural, multi-ethnic, racial.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that.
Yeah.
So I think for us, you know, the idea of the South Asian community, most people sort of see us as tech immigrants. Right now, depending on when you might encounter the South Asian community, we're seen as either tech immigrants post 90s or post 1965. We're seen as doctors, lawyers, engineers. And most of our own community also believes that this is when they came here. So a lot of the education that we do and part of doing this tour is for our own communities to know our histories and all of the various ways that we even got these rights, right? So for example, 1965, a big part of why that happened is it was an outcome of the civil rights movement. So when we talk about our engagement with Black communities in the US, often we talk about anti-Blackness that exists in our communities. And I think we really need to look back at our history and see all the ways our communities have come together. The walking tour website, a related project is called blackdesisecrethistory.org. And on that, we talk about all of the various ways that the Black and South Asian community have come together. So a big part of our job as folks who are educating our own communities is talking about the histories of solidarity. And the histories of solidarity, those stories are really important even on the walking tour. We talk about how the Punjabi and Mexican communities came together when the early days Punjabi men were moving here and there were very few women here, that they were finding love, community, and access to resources through marrying Mexican women. So for us today, we try to embody those ideas of solidarity with the work we're doing. So as part of doing the renaming, we tried to get support from all various kinds of communities, and it was really important to us to reach out to to folks who are native to Berkeley, the original people of Berkeley, and get their support. And I think that kind of nuance and approach to doing work that's identity-based is really important, where we're not just stuck in our identity, but our identity is a lens for us to connect with the struggles of other communities and see how we can do this work together.
Okay. And John, how about you in Philadelphia, especially as you evolved and developed political support for the Reconnect Communities effort?
You know, just listening to the presentations and understanding our own histories and family histories, right? Asian Americans in this country have, we're not even at the starting line, right? And when we get there, we get pushed back. You know, one thing we didn't talk about is Japanese internment, right? So just laws that were discriminatory against Asians in this country. So when we talk about where do we start from and how do we get to where we want to head to? And in talking about empowerment and organizing, right? We have learned as an organization and as a community that what can be very powerful is, I talked about planning, but not just planning, but when a plan is created, it's written text. And what we did with our last plan is we actually got the city of Philadelphia City Planning Commission to, at one of their regularly scheduled hearings, is to accept and adopt our plan for Chinatown. That's really powerful for a community that is not very political, doesn't have the votes. So there are many ways and tools that we can use to sort of achieve empowerment without having the electoral power that
And
other
John,
groups may have.
sorry to interrupt, but was that a plan that the city officially developed with your input, or was that a plan that came from your community and
Oh,
presented to the city?
no, this was our plan.
Okay.
We got foundation funding to develop this plan. We hired the consultants. We did it. But, we created a steering committee. Of course, some of the city officials were on that steering committee, right? So it's just to get that buy-in at the beginning of the planning process. But it was our plan. And, I think at the end of the day, the municipal government is too large to pay attention and to small neighborhoods and communities. And so this was a real opportunity for our neighborhood to share our vision, tell our story, and demand our goals for our community. So again, planning helps get us on the map, gets us time and attention at city council, and clearly gets us attention among the different departments at the mayoral administration level.
Okay, thank you. And then Ditas, with National City, I mean, the Filipinos community have been there since after World War II. And
They're the second oldest city, but us listening to the presentations, and just like what John said, squeaky wheel gets the oil. For us here in the South Bay, Filipino community, and the Asian American community, Pacific Islander, there's about 142 organizations. So here in San Diego County for Asian Americans. So for the Filipino community, sometimes you see the difficulty or the challenges in getting them together because, there are different opinions and different likes and dislikes. But with organizing them, and I think educating them with how we can be more represented in the policy making body of making sure that the interest and the interest of our community is at least listened to or looked at by those policymakers. So organizing the Filipino community here in San Diego County, it sometimes have challenges, but with how we did this districting in National City, the only two cities that are not districted. So when we organized and we educated them, and we had educated the council as well, because they didn't want to look at us. It's like, who are you? You're only 38% here. Yeah, but 38% matters. We wanted to make sure that they listen to us and they hear us, that we Filipino Americans or Asian Americans here in the South Bay matters. And so, at that time, we were able to make them, because of the noise that we made, they were the ones who paid for everything in order for this, in order for this districting to happen. So I believe in educating them, having a conversation, reaching out to other organizations. And sometimes it's difficult because just like what John said, sometimes we're quiet as Asian Americans, but again, if we're not going to, educate the people that we wanted to listen to us and hear our interests and our asks or our what's best for a community, because they don't know what's best for our community. So we have to educate them. And I believe of having a good relationship, building a good relationship, not just with the policymakers, but also the people who works for the city or the government, because they're the ones that makes it happen. Thanks,
Yeah.
Bill.
And well, and I had a question that I struggled with when I was a kid, having to fill out a census is, given that, San Diego has a large also Latino, Hispanic, Latinx community, does the Filipino community consider themselves part of that or different because being a Spanish colony for 500 years?
Well, we gotta make sure that we assert our own identity, because that's very important for our culture, for our younger generation, that we wanted to to make sure that our language and our culture are out there to be able to at least these younger generations can understand our culture. We reach out to our brothers and sisters in the Latinx community, but they understand that we as Filipino Americans or Asian Americans have our own identity.
Okay, good. Thank you. Another question I had was, John, you had talked about the either through gentrification or people moving out, the reduction in population in your community over the last couple decades. And question that I have, it's really for everybody, is do you see with your communities as that families grow economically, do they stay and reinvest and build the community economically, or do they move out to the suburbs, for their family, rather than be place-based? What do you see with the populations, and how can you keep them engaged and reinvest into your community?
Yeah, Bill, that's a great question. And our family is one of those that moved out of Chinatown, right?
Mhm.
The suburbs, which is 20 minutes away. But Chinatown was still a home. Our businesses were here. My kids and I would come here every weekend. But the one thing that Chinatown didn't have enough of, and it still doesn't, and we're trying to figure out how to fix this, is a housing stock that can grow with the community, meaning family style housing. We live in Philadelphia. I think we're one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in all of Philadelphia, including the more wealthy districts where there's high-rise condominiums, right? Chinatown has no high-rises. We have a few. But what we lack is a family housing for small families, 4, 5, 6 person families. We just don't have enough of that housing. And because of that, families move out. We have one of the best elementary schools across the city of Philadelphia. So, education is very important to parents. So families want to live in Chinatown. We have amenities and we have services that families care about. And I think if we can figure out the housing stock, I think we can help slow down that trend where people are moving out to Chinatown. Because one thing I think we still have is this hub as a cultural place of celebration and heritage. So we have a few assets in Chinatown that are very strong, and we have to figure out how to complement these assets with other things.
Yeah. Okay. But Benali, what about the Indian community and
Yeah, and I'll say South Asian because we also have a lot of Bangladeshi folks who live in the Bay Area. And just like Asian American communities as a whole, South Asian community is also quite diverse. For all of the places that we showed, we have a growing Nepalese population here in Berkeley. I think it's complicated with the community. Like the Sikh community is an older community. They're spread all over California. You know, it's quite diverse. I think with our new immigrant communities, the power of American culture, of the single family home and cars is what was sold to a lot of people. So when they move here, that is definitely seen as the aspiration, and to have your kids in like a good school is definitely seen as an aspiration. And it's very difficult to combat that often. But I think in general, we are seeing a shift with a lot of younger folks. And as we get more and more multi-generational and folks who are growing up here, it's a little bit different, I think. But the American suburb is still seems to attract a lot of people, because that's honestly where we put our resources. So I think that's what people are chasing, is if we put more resources into our communities, like John is saying, you know, then people would stay there. And a lot of the resources are in the suburbs, especially schools, and that's why people move. So it's complicated.
We have a comment by Lady Kasama that the Asian American community in Huntsville, Alabama, reinvests and stays in the community. They grow as they grow economically.
Yeah, and I can say that the community does invest, but what they choose to invest in, is different. I guess there's definitely investment in religious and some cultural institutions, but we see a lot of our museums and art, you know, even like some political campaigns don't get as much investment as our community is capable of.
Okay.
So that's definitely something to think about, especially maybe it's an immigrant approach of not ever being sure how secure you are here to be able to give freely. So.
Yeah. And Ditas, do you see, you've been there for 30 years, families seem to stay in National City as it grow economically, or are they moving out to?
You know what? Yes, sir. They, you know, the economic development, parents sending their kids to school, you know, I mean, for them also, taking care of their growth, economically and community wise. They purchase their home because, you know, I mean, that's a generational wealth that they wanted to share to the family. And then, you know, I mean, I see a lot of young generation coming back to our city to join the family, to join not basically living in, some of them, they go back to mom and dad because mom and dad are empty nesters. And, you know, as the high rent, you know, I mean, rent economic wise, the younger generation come back. Sometimes they purchase their own home, build their own, you know, belong to the community and just support the economic development in our community. So, so I think, you know, I mean, we're closely knit, you know, I mean, family, Filipino Americans, and then we extend this to, you know, I mean, relatives everywhere and friends and relatives. Sometimes you go back to where you're comfortable and know that you can grow there and you can build your community there. Yeah, or here. Like me, I've been here for 30 years in the South Bay. Build community, reach out to a lot. So it's a good place to stay, sir.
Yeah, I kind of see a theme here about the importance of building and maintaining your cultural institutions and services, religious institutions, education. So even if population moves out, they still have an attachment to the place and sometimes come back to the place, right? To live, which I think for some of the members who are maybe at different stages of development, you know, especially in high cost housing markets, is, you know, do they focus first initially on services or housing? You know, is it a housing first strategy and then build the service infrastructure, or do they focus on building the service infrastructure, and then over time, invest and build real estate, housing, and commercial development.
Well, as you can see
So-
here in the South Bay, it's concurrent, because if you have density, you have to have services for those density that they can serve. And I mean, going back to what your comment about taking care of our own culture, I think we have to, because if we don't, who will?
Yeah.
To assert the culture here in the South Bay or in San Diego County, the language, we fight for that language, that there's Filipino language in the education system, because it's our culture,
Yeah,
Bill.
great. And
Now,
John,
Bill, there's as Asian Americans, the pandemic was just proof that we're one phrase away from being relevant or being looked upon as American citizens in this country, right? And the work that we do to preserve the heritage and culture, that's right, Benali said it right, we have to teach and educate our future generations about our history, because if we don't know our history, we don't know where we're going to go, and so the work that we do is, when I talk about comprehensive planning, today's D-Day, right? And we have Chinese Americans who live in Chinatown that are veterans of World War II, right? And when non-Asians think and see us, I don't know that they think that any of us are part of the American military that has defended this country. And so planning and neighborhood development and economic investment in our communities is really important. Number one, to lift up our history and our story. But I think there's competing forces for Asian Americans. We also want to be accepted as Americans, right? So there's also a fast track into figuring out how we can be Americans as quickly as possible. So suburban life introduces us to being Americans, and things like that. So there's just competing forces, but we must remember we have to invest in our own histories.
and just a reminder to the audience, please type in any questions you want us to ask in the chat. Benali? No, okay. Yeah. Now, it sounds like you're in some, well, I know at least two of you are in markets that are under a lot of strong gentrification pressure, right? And Philadelphia and Berkeley and National City's getting there too. And so how do you look at gentrification as a positive or as a negative? How do you protect? Is it something you embrace but have a strategy to for your population to benefit from it, or because I think a lot of communities of all different types, it's more income related, are struggling with that.
I can go first, but I think my answer will be different than because we don't have a visible South Asian community in the same way, or a geographically dense area of Berkeley that is South Asian. We're pretty much everywhere. For me, the word gentrification is an interesting one, but I also think that in a place like Berkeley, we can have more housing for people, and we have the space to build that. And we're part of the change of not having everything be zoned for single family, which is what I think 90% of California is zoned for single family housing. And Berkeley stopped building apartments in the 70s because they were afraid of certain kinds of people moving into their neighborhoods. And I think those certain kinds of people included people who look like me. When I moved here, as we saw from Kalabagai's story, and this is happening for over a century. So I'm a big proponent of building housing, of building as much affordable housing that we can, but also just correcting the decades of not building housing that we've done that has kept out so many people from our communities. When I moved here as a grad student, that was one of the hardest things that I did. And I was also moving here to look for, as a young South Asian woman who was under the pressure of like, get married, otherwise, and that's why I was moving to this country, was for freedom and access to opportunity and economic independence. One of the hardest things I did was try to find a safe place to live in Berkeley. And that's something that I don't want anyone else who's moving here and seeking this as a place of refuge or opportunity to deal with. So I think we have to be careful when we say gentrification and try to define the words better. And I think that's also part of the reason we do the tour, is to educate folks who are newly moving into the city of what their responsibility is as folks moving here. It's not to say that we've moved here and nobody can move here after us anymore. It's to pay attention to the history of the place that they're moving to and to learn from the values that the place can teach them, that our ancestors can teach them. But I think that's from the individual's perspective, from the planning perspective. And I think there's also a question here which talks about like, how do we advocate for Asian American communities but not compete with other minorities? I think we are very often left out from planning processes because we're seen as wealthy. But I think even if you have money, money doesn't always protect you from racism. I think we see that in Kalabagai's case, we see that post 9/11. And so there are still some very specific things that need to be done to protect our Asian American communities. And Asian American communities, like I said, are not all the same. Data disaggregation will show that when we're looking at our community, that there are people who are suffering within our own communities, and we need to be able to highlight those struggles as well. Like, we had a very active Bhutanese community here that moved from Oakland to Pittsburgh, I think, because
Pittsburgh, California.
during COVID, because they couldn't afford to live here anymore. So we need folks who are making these decisions to look at all of the range of issues and think about how we invite folks who are refugees from many different kinds of things who want to live in our city, while also taking care not to displace those folks who've lived here for a long time.
We had two related questions. One was how not to compete with other minorities, and then the other was, given that we have in the large cities very pan-Asian Asian populations, how not to compete with other Asian populations. Okay, and Hing, did you want to wrap up, or we have one other point here, is we have been pushing for data.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and finish off, and then I'll close in a minute or two.
And AARP's been funding on data aggregation, so much of it is data. I remember once the city of San Diego, for example, was looking at Linda Vista community here, and they called it an Asian community. And we knew better that no, it was Vietnamese of different waves, Chinese, Filipino, Hmong, Cambodian, Laotian, and had to educate the city that these were all different communities.
That's not the same thing, Bill?
No, exactly.
I'll add a point though. I think as much as, and I think we all agree that we need data disaggregation, I think there is power in us coming together. And that's why we're here today. Because when people look at us from the outside, they don't see these differences. And therefore, we're also often the victim of certain kinds of racism. And I think there's a lot of power in Asian American communities coming together. And on the walking tour, we tell the story of the Association of Oriental Students, which was founded all the way back in 1907. And They had folks from Thailand and China and India
Yeah.
and British India, of course. And folks then understood the power of us coming together. So I think we need to fight for data disaggregation and also look out for each other based on what kind of privilege we have within.
That's a good point and good political advice. Yes.
Concur.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I would like to personally thank our speaker, Ditas, John, and Bernali, for their wonderful insights on their communities. Thank you for Hanson for organizing this and for Bill for moderating it. Like I said earlier at the beginning, we have a very active Asian and Pacific Islander interest group. We do our our quarterly newsletter, and we'll do an article on this webinar in our summer issue of our newsletter. Please, this webinar has also been recorded, and we'll post a link to it when it's available. But the best way to find out about our group is, if you're not already a member, is to join. It's free membership. There's a link right there. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us with the email address you see on your screen right there, Asian Pacific Islander Planning @gmail.com. And finally, our website is apiplanning.org. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. And in mid-July, we'll have we'll have a meet and greet social session online. So hopefully you could join us for that in mid-July. We'll send out more information when it becomes available. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day or good evening wherever you are.
Thanks, everyone.